Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar, SharePoint File Migration. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'm the moderator today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Norwin Herrera. I'm the IT Business Manager Team Lead.
I'm Norwin Harris. I'm a cloud technology engineer here at Community IT.
So we do have some more questions coming in, but we're going to move on to talk about change management. So we've talked a lot about what a big change this is for Chinatown CDC and for any nonprofit trying to migrate and consolidate their file sharing. So we do have some tips. We have some other change management on our website, but Robin, I think you were going to talk a little bit about what we've learned that can help organizations kind of manage their way through this process.
Right. So Community IT has some generic roadmap templates that you can use to help your change management and help manage your timelines. Think about the impact and staff deliverables as you roll out your plans. Leadership needs to prioritize a large IT project with far-reaching impact. We need to help staff take some things off of their plate, the staff that's going to be involved in this, just so that they can have time for this project. Leadership needs to lead by example, reporting on the migration, letting staff see them using and championing the common SharePoint, and we recommend that you start by forming a governance team. Giving them authority and time to prioritize is essential. This is something we probably realized a little bit later in the game for CCDC, but it is necessary. It is vital that you start off with a governance team.
Identify champions, power user, give them incentives to share tips with the colleague through the brown bags presentation. This is very important because you can have some people against your project and you can have people pro your project. So if you identify those people who can help you in the implementation will be great. Then identifying training requirements. This is also very, very important. And work with human resources to implement them at the onboarding and in performance evaluations. This is another great a strategy, I will say, to make sure that people use SharePoint the way it's supposed to be for your organization. And then people will gravitate to the method they know. So if no one is checking, they use the new methods, they will not use them. Create evaluation points and rewards for the department and staff who are making the changes you want. And then give your project time and expect it to take time. You know, it's not easy. It's not simple to move from one platform to another one. Built-in checkpoints and ways to communicate as timelines inevitable change. And it's better to do this project successfully than quickly. I think this is a good phrase to end the tip because it's not about faster. It's about how effective you make it so people understand that it's a tool you're given to your organization to make it secure, to make it collaborative, and also to keep it in one place, okay? Because I think there is a question about SharePoint and OneDrive. It's important to note that SharePoint is the collaboration space. OneDrive is your personal work folder, okay? That's a very, very, very different thing. Your personal work folder. It's not your property. It's your company's files, but it's your personal space. And then SharePoint is the collaborative space that we have.
That's all great. Thank you so much. And I think, a lot of that, it's like it's not easy to see, but this is some of our experience and some of the things we pulled out of our experience, but it can be really, really hard to put that in place. So hopefully this webinar and referring back to some of these slides can give you some ideas of how to make your migration change management really happen. So I wanted to make sure that we left a lot of time for Q&A, and I think that we have. I'm going to say, let's go to the questions that were asked. There's some that haven't been answered yet. So the first question was, is a site the same as a folder? And if not, what's the difference? I think we did kind of get at that, but Robin, would you like to just clarify that?
Yes, a site is a collection of folders and files. So a site, just like a website that you would go to that site and then see the content that is located on that site, which can be comprised of files and folders and files in folders.
Yeah, so the folders are in the site, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
All right, so how do you suggest working with volunteers who need access to one or more of your teams or maybe your sites?
You can share your content externally. I strongly recommend you do not use anyone links, because then it's difficult to keep track of what you have shared. That is a security red flag. And once you have shared with an anyone link, anyone can then transfer that file to anyone. So yeah, it's definitely a red flag. But you can share externally, so long as your organization's settings are set to do that. And it just looks a little bit different when they click on the link. They're asked to authenticate, and I think they're asked to authenticate and then verify their authentication. And that's if they are external to your organization, and if they are external to Microsoft 365. It looks slightly different if your external user is also using Microsoft 365. It's a little it just cuts out one step for them.
But it doesn't matter if somebody's using a Mac or on Google, they have a Gmail, they can use it as well. Would you recommend, if you have like if you have a big volunteer group, would you recommend making a site that's all of the materials they would need to access?
Yes, we have a client that is primarily made up of volunteers. And yes, there is a site, specifically an internal site as well as an external site that they can use to share documents with the outside world, as well as their internal volunteer department.
So I think we answered the next question a little bit. Someone says, do you have any comments on the experience of OneDrive on a Mac? I find it unpredictable and not as seamless as Dropbox, for example. It's
getting better. So now, in fact, earlier today, I actually did some training with a client that they're all using Macs. The only missing step with OneDrive that is available in Windows as opposed to Mac is that there's no backup feature. You can back up. You just have to manually drag into OneDrive the items that you would like to back up. Once items are in that folder, they're in that folder forever until you actually physically remove them. So yeah, it is still just as stable. It's just that one feature is not available.
Excellent, thanks. So our next question is about multiple platforms. So if you have half of your organization using Microsoft and the other half maybe using Google Drive, does it make sense to migrate as many people as are willing to use Microsoft to SharePoint, even if you know that there are still going to be some people that are on Google?
I think I can help with this one. I think this is very interesting because do you want to live in two worlds, right? In two different worlds, and both of them are exactly the same, because Google offers you some things that are completely similar to SharePoint. So I think the question here is more about, where do you really want to implement a good governance where do you really want to make sure that people understand the way to collaborate? Because Google has Google Workspace. So you can make it happen in Google Workspace. You just need to make sure that people knows and that people is trained, and then everybody is on the same page. That's more like the question here. I mean, you can live in both worlds, but it's not ideal. You're gonna have problems. So that's my answer.
If you're deliberate about it, I think, so you would just know in your training, when you have new staff, are they going to be in one or the other? And then they would get that training. And probably there's a little part of the training that's about collaborating with somebody who's in the other world, right?
Correct. That's the way it is.
All right, we have another question. If the files are not permanently deleted after migration, where are they stored for redundancy? You were talking earlier about the migration when you flip that switch.
I mean, we don't delete it permanently. We just for a short period of time. Those files are going to be gone. The thing is, we keep them alive for some time. The organization can make their own decision how long they want to keep it. Usually they can be 3 months, 6 months, and after that it's gone. Like there's no more need to keep them because we already migrate them. Like 100% of those files are migrated. And also when they are migrated, we can back them up. So you can use a backup, from Microsoft solution for backup. So you can back up your files. So you can come back to your files from a year ago, for 2 years ago, from whatever, right? So you don't need to have those files. You can, basically destroy them.
Well, I know that probably freaks a lot of people out, but yes, when you're at that point, you already have them. That brings up a different question for me. Do you recommend that people go through their files ahead of time and like delete the ones that are like 20 years old, or like all of the photos from the gala in 2011 that nobody's ever going to look at again? Or do you tell them to just bring all of the files over and not worry about it?
Well, it's part of their the work process. We are constantly meeting with the department head, in this case, with the department head. And the initial meetings are first identifying where the data is, and then identifying what data should move. During the what data should move is when the organization is also weighing how far back they want to actually move files from. And that it can be daunting. You can set an arbitrary date, or you can set some more specific guidelines, like what types of files you're going to keep everything of. Like finance files, all of it goes. But the website from 1995
ago.
Right.
Also,
you don't need it anymore.
Right.
This opened the doors for retention policy. So usually organizations don't think about it, but this is the good time to review your retention policy. How long are you going to keep your files for your organization? How long are you required to keep them? So that is a good starting point for reviewing your retention policy in your organization. That's
great. What did you mean? Here's another question. What did you mean at the beginning when we said that SharePoint is not good at storing large files? And this person says, we have some InDesign files and large photo and film files in SharePoint.
So first I'll address the InDesign. Adobe offers their own cloud solution, which we strongly recommend using for your Adobe files. Large files are not best kept in SharePoint because since they are all located on a website, that requires that you have to download every time you access a file. So, depending on the speed of your internet access, that could, put a damper on your productivity for the day if you have to wait a long time to download a 50 gig document.
Mm-hmm. And there are other products, like you said, that are maybe better suited to larger files. I mean, I think if you've got a few and, it's not something that your nonprofit it's not the basis of your nonprofit, then, probably can store a few larger files in. But if you're working with a lot of larger files all the time, SharePoint might not be the best solution.
Right.
Another question, do you recommend users sync SharePoint to File Explorer?
This is a very interesting question. And I mean, we recommend it if the folder and that you are trying to synchronize is not big. Like it's a folder that you work all the time, but it's small, because you got to consider that whatever you sync is going to go into your hard drive. Usually now people don't buy, I mean, organizations are not buying computer with a big hard drive, because most of the data is in the cloud. So a 256 gigabytes computer isn't a small computer. Even your phone will have more space than your computer. So if you know that the folder or the site that you're going to synchronize is extremely big, do not recommend synchronizing. It's better to work online, you know. Otherwise, you're going to crash your computer, basically. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, good advice. We don't want that. Mm-hmm. All right, then the next question is, it's a little bit complicated. I'm going to try and distill it down. So this is a person who had a very small team, and they were using OneDrive for everything, basically just sharing it between two people. So as they grow in staff, can they migrate that OneDrive folder to a SharePoint site? Like, is it as easy as just taking where everything used to be and moving it over to SharePoint? I assume that they would still need to look at what's in there, and they might want to create different sites based on what the content is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So actually with our case study company, we are moving one of their departments that's how they were sharing their content, was from OneDrive. And now they have decided to move all of their documents to SharePoint. We're using the same tools to move it, and the same method, same approach to the migration, where they are deciding what sites they want to create and which files and folders go to which site. And yes, it's the location of where your data is not as much of an issue as just making sure that it all moves.
Exactly. As you grow in staff, you're going to have different permission levels, right? Like when you're a small organization with two people, you probably both can see everything. But as you grow, you're going to want to have those sites that have the different permissions. Right. All right. We have a comment that says OneDrive files on demand stops syncing files to HD. That sounds too technical for me. Do you guys want to comment on that?
So there are some limitations I think what I'm answering is what you're asking. There are some limitations. Microsoft has set, right now it's at 300,000 files that it will sync. If you're approaching that limit, it will start to slow down. It will stop. It causes problem. So that is what Norwin was referring to when he was saying that, yes, it's a good idea to only sync what you actually need to have on a daily basis. And that goes for your OneDrive files too. There you can certainly archive, as it were, things to the cloud and only have those things available, when you absolutely need them, as opposed to, having everything on your computer.
So I want to thank everyone for coming today, and thank you so much, Robin and Norwin, for just taking us through SharePoint, how it works, and talking to us about this, actual migration that you're in the middle of right now. So we had some great, practitioner experiences that you could share with us, and some tips on the change management as well. I will put all of our answers to all of the questions that came in the transcript. But if you can stay, Robin and Norwin both said that they could stay on for another 5 minutes or so and answer some more questions. So I think actually we have some of these that we already did hit on it. Do you need a dedicated internal SharePoint administrator? If you have SharePoint, we touched on that. You need to have somebody that's very familiar with it and is responsible for it and is given the responsibility and the time to do it. Can I just continue storing everything on my OneDrive? What's the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint? I think we already covered that. So hopefully you have a better understanding of that. How do I share with external people? We covered that as well. You just invite them with the email. You can also, if like we talked about with the volunteers, if you have a large cohort of people that you need to collaborate with outside of your organization, you can create a site that they have permissions to. What's the best way to set up the files in SharePoint? Is there a generic template I can use? I don't think we've hit on that yet. Norwin, do you want to talk about that?
No, I mean, the best way to do it is contact Community IT. We can help you out.
Well, you said something great when we were preparing for this, where you said that the template is your organization. Like our organization needs are going to be so different. There's no one generic way that everyone should always set their files up. That like you did with the Chinatown CDC, you have to like talk to the departments, look through your data, figure out what sites make sense to have permissions for which groups, all of that sort of thing. So
that's correct. Yeah. Every organization has their own way of thinking as well. You know, like they might have exactly the same departments, but they can think differently the way they want to collaborate. So
yeah,
there's no template for this. It's basically we accommodate to your needs and we help you.
Exactly. And it's not going to work if it doesn't fit what your organization, like how you think about the work that you do and the departments that you have and the teams that you have.
Correct.
All right. So next question is, how should I manage folder permissions? I think we already hit on that. But we don't recommend setting permissions by folder.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. We don't.
You should set the permissions by the site. So everyone that has access to that site has access to all the folders and all of the documents within those folders.
Exactly.
Correct.
This is a good one. How many sites do I need for a 10 to 15 person staff?
I would say let the content direct how many sites you need. If you have extensive HR things, you need an HR site. If you have, finance documents, you need a finance site. Try not to have it depend on a person, because as we all know, staff changes. And if staff has moved and it was dependent on that person's job to manage it, it then becomes, a sticking point to move somebody else into that way of thinking.
Would you say there's any red flags? Like if you're a 5-person organization and you have like 50 sites, is that maybe overcomplicated?
You are over-engineered. One site is generally enough for, yeah.
Okay, so here's a good question. How can I fix the mess after a bad migration? Do I have to just start over?
It certainly can be done. We still approach it the exact same way. Look at the content, figure out, some, similarities in your content, decide where things should move to. Yeah, it's still the same approach. It may take a little longer because you're also unwinding a way of thought as well as the actual data, but it certainly can be done.
I think also at that point, you probably want to look at and do some deep thinking as an organization about where the roadblocks came. Like, why did you end up with a bad migration or a mess after you migrated, and try to maybe ameliorate some of those issues can help you figure out how to fix the data that kind of ended up maybe in this crazy system or such. Which there's a great question that just came in. We already have an ad hoc setup in Teams with lots of channels. How can we go backward to sort out our SP sites, SharePoint sites, and implement them like back into Teams? Deleting or changing names of channels in Teams is not easy, and that doesn't transfer directly to SharePoint. So can you talk a little bit? I know I already put in the chat that we have a totally different 1-hour webinar on our site about Teams specifically, and how when you're sharing documents through Teams, you are sharing them through SharePoint, but you may not know it because you're just sharing it, with your colleague through Teams. So you can go back and check that out. But if you have a structure in Teams that is working, do you have advice on going back to SharePoint and kind of making it match what's in Teams?
We actually are recommending that if you are already using Teams, keep using Teams. That seems to be the direction that Microsoft is going in. Teams is right now their kind of pet project. They're certainly, I know if you have used Teams in the recent past, they have, there's multiple versions.
Changing.
Yes, but the SharePoint and the documents stay the same. So that's a good credit to Microsoft that they're keeping the back door and the back end still consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, here's a question. What are storage requirements and what should I do to get more storage? So we touched on this earlier, but do you want to answer in a little bit more information?
Storage requirements?
Yeah, basically,
yes.
How do you get more storage? Like, what is storage based on? Is it per user?
So it starts at 1 terabyte per tenant. So when you sign up for Microsoft 365, you get 1 terabyte of data for your organization. Actually, and also you get 1 terabyte of data for each person in OneDrive too. So you're getting a lot of storage. And then, yes, you can purchase additional storage. There's Microsoft 365 add-on, storage add-on. And then you could also do it via adding more types of a license. I think it's the A5, E5, and G5 licenses that afford you more SharePoint data to share as well.
Correct. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. What are the best ways to get staff up to speed on a SharePoint migration? You want to talk a little bit more about that?
I will say that you should train them. Training and enforcing the way of using things is the best way. Like they're not gonna use it if they're not. And you got to tell them how to do the business, right? This is your organization, and this is the way how you want to make business, on the way that you want to manage your organization. So the first thing you do when they are onboarded, they are new, you gotta get them into train. And then the people who has been in the organization for a longer time, they're always resistant to change, right? Because they don't want to change the way they do things. But then you got to train them, because usually the resistance comes because they don't know what is coming. So it's better to tell them what is coming, show them the differences and also the power that they have with this new way of doing things. And then that will help a lot.
Yeah, I think anytime that you're making somebody's job harder, they're going to be resistant. So the more you can show them that this makes it easier to find something, easier to collaborate, and the more automatic you can make it as well. It's like when you hit save, it just automatically goes into your site. That's, like the better. I think for me also, like the first way that you taught me how to do it is the way I'm going to keep doing it. So, and because Microsoft gives you 20 ways to do the same thing, you could have somebody who, like, they're not resistant to using SharePoint per se. It's just that they learned one way to save their documents. So if you do the training of how to save them the way you want them to, they'll start doing that. It's not, it's not that they're angry about it. They're just, maybe set in their ways. So.
I would also say that the consistency of the rollout is important. If you're doing this for multiple departments, keeping it consistent, keeping the migration, the training, and the support, the after support consistent is a good method to keep staff up to speed too. Because even though they are part of one department, if they've talked to somebody else in their department, in somebody else's department,
yeah,
it's good
to
to
talk.
Yeah.
And that's where I think leadership as well, like you need to show if you're if your executive level leaders are not sharing on the site the way that they're supposed to be, then nobody else is going to either, because there's no leadership there, like showing them that how important it is to the organization. And I think, Norwin, you talked about you can record your training so that that's available later, or so that you have like maybe mini recordings of just how you do this one thing that you forget how to do, and then you can just look at a short recording to remember.
Correct. Yeah, we're recording the trainings, and then we place the training into the SharePoint site so they can have the recording in there and use it as any time as they want. And also, if the organization think that there is a need to create something more specific, like how do you do this? Like how do you use OneDrive? What's the difference? How do you share a file? You can create mini trainings, like mini 2-minute videos internally with exactly your mock-up of your organization. So you don't need to grab a video from YouTube to share. You can do your own video, like a 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 1 minute video will be sufficient to help your organization to use SharePoint.
Be consistent. And I really love that idea of getting HR to get involved in it too, for onboarding and like performance reviews as well. So just there are those other checkpoints, because sometimes training like falls entirely on the IT people, and maybe they're not the best trainers all the time. So if you get the people who are involved in the onboarding, like you have all these other trainings that you have to figure out how you get your payroll, you have to, set up this, you have to set up that. And they're used to doing that, and just it's another little unit in there that you take on your first day or second day of like, here's how we save our files. I think that makes a lot of sense too.
Correct.
So our learning objectives for today were to learn about SharePoint and what it can do, learn the steps and best practices for a SharePoint migration project. Thank you guys so much for sharing all of that with us. So this work that you guys are working on right now, and then discuss the change management tips, which thank you both for sharing that with us. So I don't see any more questions coming in. I want to thank everybody who stuck with us. There were quite a few people who stayed on for an extra 15 minutes. Norwin and Robin, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and knowledge with us. I feel like I personally have already learned a whole bunch more about how OneDrive and SharePoint work that I wasn't fully aware of before. So I hope that this webinar has been helpful to others. And I just want to really thank you again for joining us. And thank you, everybody who stuck with us. And thank you, Robin and Norwin.
Thank you, everyone, for staying.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.